Hi everyone, hope you're well. Chris Cowlin here. Now before we get into it, I'd just like to inform you about a new website selling quality current and retro Spurs jerseys, okjersey.com. They sell all current and retro Tottenham Hotspur shirts in all sizes. They sell the current fan and player versions as well as the 80s and 90s retro shirts, including my very favourite, the 1991 FA Cup final shirt. You can order very easily from okjersey.com, and if you use the code Chris, you will receive an 8% discount off your final order. You can also use the QR code on the top left of your screen. And by the way, they also have some training wear here and the 25-26 colour special edition jersey. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're all doing well. This is another edition of Premier League predictions. My name is Chris Cowlin, and this evening I'll be joined by Gareth McGuinness. We will be going through Matchweek 21, predicting the scores for the 10 Premier League fixtures. Now, one game will take place on Tuesday, 8 on Wednesday, and 1 on Thursday. Now, we're live on YouTube, live on Facebook and X. Please do get involved. Let us know what you are thinking right now about this Premier League campaign. 20 games in, 18 left to play. Now, match week 20, there were wins for Aston Villa, Brighton, a first win of the season for Wolves, at home beating West Ham 3-0. Also wins for league leaders Arsenal, Brentford and Newcastle. Now, Arsenal are 6 points clear at the top of the Premier League table right now, and Manchester City and Aston Villa in second and third respectively with 42 points. West Ham, Burnley and Wolves are all in the bottom three. Now, Tuesday's game will be West Ham against Nottingham Forest. Wednesday's games will be Bournemouth against Spurs. Brentford will take on Sunderland. Crystal Palace against Aston Villa. Everton will take on Wolves. Fulham against Chelsea. Manchester City will take on Brighton. Burnley against Manchester United, who of course have just sacked their manager, Ruben Amorim. Newcastle will take on Leeds. And Thursday's game is a huge one. It is Arsenal against Liverpool. Gareth, how are you?
Well, Chris, it's been a bit of a crazy start to 2025, isn't it?
2026.
Or 2026, sorry. I'm still stuck in the past. Still thinking about that one in Bilbao, 2025. I'm actually starting to wonder when the next moment like Bilbao will be for Tottenham fans. But look, it's been a bit of a crazy start to 2026. We think about Maresca losing his job. I'm fine, by the way. My job's still safe, thanks to be God, because there seems to be a lot of managers losing jobs at the minute. Amorim today, of course, and of course, I know we're not going to be covering Celtic, but Wilfred Nancy losing his job today. So it's been a bit of a crazy start. And I think we've seen it today in Frank's press conference. He was asked about Amorim as well. There will be a lot of managers feeling like, there's been a few changes. Is there going to be more changes? I think the first game we're going to speak about will have massive ramifications for Nuno in that West Ham game against Nottingham Forest. So much to talk about. I think it's going to be an action-packed show tonight. So hopefully the people watching get involved as well, because so much to talk about. You always think that it's going to be a nice, easy start to the year, but for a lot of these managers, it's not been a nice, easy start to the year.
Gareth, let's start by talking about those managerial changes, or I say changes, sackings. Maresca and Amorim, of course, today, because these managerial changes, they're not about results.
Yeah, I don't know whether Amorim has watched what's happened with Chelsea and Maresca and thought, you know what, I'm not that happy here. Maybe there's been a conversation behind closed doors that we're not going to go into the market in January, and that has maybe accelerated his thoughts and his position. But there is some part of me that thinks if Maresca hadn't said what he says, would Amorim have went down that route? And I think it's very, very coincidental, if it's not purposeful, that these two, Amorim has followed the Maresca route and the same outcome has came. So maybe Amorim thought that, this is a way of getting my payout. I can leave before maybe things get worse. There's not going to be any reinforcements in January. And he referenced It does remind you of Antonio Conte at Tottenham, the way he left, that you kind of felt that his press conference in his final game was basically sack me because, I'm not happy here.
I think
he repeated it so many times in his press conference about him being the manager or wanting to be the manager and not the head coach. He knew what he was doing, and it was pretty obvious that he wanted out, and he got the outcome that he wanted. And it's probably the only job in the world I can think that you can basically say what you want, when you want, perform how you want, and you'll still get a big package when you leave your role. And let's be honest, we've tried to give Amram time on the show, and we've tried to, give him some positives. But if you look at his 1% rate since he's been there, it's not been good enough. And I think Jamie Carragher was spot on last night when he says on the Super Sunday Extra Time show that, Maresca was in a bit more of a powerful position due to what he's done at Chelsea, finished in the top 4, won in the Europa Conference League, won in the Club World Cup. Amram's best achievement was making the final, losing to Tottenham. 15th last season. And yes, they are in 6th position this year, but it's not a very strong league. They've had most of their players fit for most of the season, albeit in the last few weeks they've lost Bruno, they've lost Mount, and players have went to the AFCON. But they've only been playing once a week. They haven't had European commitments. So I think in any other league season, United wouldn't be in 6th position. I think that's a real disappointment. I think I'll finish on this, Chris. I think what's really, really damning is Man United's statement that it wasn't anything to do with the press conference and it was a footballing decision due to results not being good enough. They've been in the job for 14 months now, and it gives the team the best chance of making European football next year with a change. So there's the other part of me of maybe there was transfer things in the background, but maybe Amram got wind of maybe United possibly talking to one of the biggest names linked is Oliver Glasner. He's got a contract in the summer. Was he getting one that maybe United were going to make a change in the summer regardless? So he felt that this was his best way of getting out. It's all up in the air, but it definitely seems that the right outcome, whatever way it went about, has probably arrived at United's doorstep.
Just very quickly on that statement, Gareth, I think all real football fans, especially the Manchester United fans, see completely through that statement.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I do. I think it's a lot to do with what he said in his press conference, but
yeah,
I referenced this on the last Premier League prediction show that I thought if Amram was going to keep his job for next season, he probably had a finish in the Champions League position. So maybe they had reservations about the long-term future, had conversations behind closed doors. Then maybe he was informed that there's no funds in January. Maybe then he leaned on, well, maybe they aren't backing me. Maybe they're going to make a change in the summer. Maybe then that's what he says. Because what I can't understand is he referenced 3 times in the press conference that he's a Man United manager, but yet he signed a contract last November 2024, that he was a Man United head coach. So what has changed in the time being? He was happy to come on as the head coach, but now he's saying he wants to be the manager. So I think it was a massive power struggle, but I also feel that maybe Amram got wind off his representatives that maybe Man United were shopping around ahead of next season, and maybe that was the spark that lit the fire.
It's interesting that, because do you remember in 2019, Pochettino, it was Bayern Munich when we played a friendly there in the Audi Cup, and he actually said in the press conference, "No, I'm the head coach. I'm not the manager." And that is where things seem to go downhill as soon as he said that.
I think that's the classic case of a manager delegating, responsibility, but almost feeling like he's working with one hand tied behind his back. Because if Amram had an idea of maybe where he wanted to strengthen the squad in January, and the head of recruitment, the director of football, had a different idea, or if they felt, in 14 months we haven't seen enough that we're going to give you any more money, you need to prove to us between now and May that you're the right man to lead us forward. Maybe secretly behind closed doors they were having conversations. And look, in reference to the Spurs with Pochettino, the Mourinho thing happened very, very quickly. I remember it was an international break after the Sheffield United game, and it was a Tuesday evening that Pochettino was relieved of his duties, and on the Wednesday morning, Jose Mourinho was unveiled as a new Spurs manager. So maybe there was talk in that sort of sphere that if Pochettino didn't achieve anything that season, maybe they were going to make a change anyway. Maybe that's what Pochettino was saying about some of the things that he said about the transfers. Obviously, we didn't start the season particularly well, and that international break, Mourinho was on within 12 hours. I think it was 12 or 14 hours later. Pochettino was sacked officially, and Mourinho was unveiled. So a lot of these football clubs work now in secrecy, and they put on these contingency plans. And unfortunately, now there's so much media, so much social media. Everyone's got agents, everyone's got journalists that work for them and against them. And I have no doubt in my mind that Amram probably got one that he probably wasn't going to be the manager next season. And maybe that's what led what's happened in the last sort of 24, 48 hours.
Yeah, that Poch one, Gareth, I remember saying, I've said it quite a few times, that if someone had had an early night and went to bed and then got up in the morning, not only had Pochettino had been sacked, but Jose Mourinho was holding up the shirt. It was that quick a turnaround. I think it was about 10 o'clock at night that Poch got the sack, and I think it was about 8 o'clock in the morning that Jose was holding up the shirt. And yeah, that happened very, very quickly. Anyway, let's move on to talk about the first game of match week 21. West Ham United host Nottingham Forest at the London Stadium. Now, West Ham at the moment at 18th. Nottingham Forest are down in 17th. This really is a huge game for both clubs. Now, West Ham most recently lost 3-0 away at Wolves. This was Wolves' first Premier League win of this campaign, and I've got to say, it was easy for Wolves. West Ham were absolutely terrible. Nottingham Forest, however, they have lost their last 4 Premier League games to Fulham away, to Manchester City at home, Everton at home, and most recently Aston Villa away. How do you see this one going, Gareth? And before you give me your opinion, West Ham are looking to complete their first league double over Forest since the 2011-12 season in the Championship, and the first in the top flight since 1968-69.
There's so many spinning plates in this fixture. If you think about this was Nuno's last game as Nottingham Forest manager, it might be his last as the West Ham manager. Personally, when you look at all the fixtures, it's not the most glamorous fixture, but I think it's probably the fixture with the most jeopardy in these 10 games. I think this is possibly, it's ironic how it's worked out that Sky have scheduled the 10 games over 3 nights, but when they scheduled these games, they probably couldn't believe their luck that there's only one game on tomorrow night. And I think every Premier League football fan will be watching because of how much jeopardy is in the game. I think after what happened on Saturday with West Ham, me and you both watched the game, the Wolves-West Ham game, and how comfortable Wolves were. I mean, it's hard to believe that was a team that hadn't won a game since April 2025 in the Premier League, that they were 3-0 up, and only for possibly one of the saves of the season, it would have been 4-0. And West Ham were so poor in that first half. It looked like a team that maybe wasn't playing for the manager. Second half, there was a bit of a response, but I think Wolves allowed them to have possession because they realised how limited West Ham were. And if anything, despite all the stats in the second half, possession-wise, Wolves looked the only team that were going to score. They had a few chances on the counter-attack. So I think, and looking at Nuno, he had that same look that he had when he lost 3-0 to Manchester United. He had the same look when he lost 3-0 to West Ham earlier in the season. And he had the very similar look against Wolves on Saturday, where he kind of feel that it's coming to an end. I think he's probably going to have to win this game on Tuesday night to have any chance of keeping his job. West Ham are in a bad way, but they are only about 7 or 8 points off from safety. So we've seen teams before in the past pull off great escapes. It's not beyond the realms they can get out of this. But Chris, they are in such a dire state at the moment, and Forest will be looking for an opportunity to arrest their form. 4 straight defeats.
Yeah.
And there is a little bit of pressure on Sean Dyche, not so much from the fans, but knowing that Nottingham Forest, their record with managers recently, you think about Steve Cooper, you think about Nuno, you think about Ange. If they lose this game, there'll be massive pressure on Sean Dyche internally. We've heard today that there's massive pressure on Eddie, who came from Arsenal, based on recruitment, based on managers being picked. So it's definitely not all rosy at Nottingham Forest. So this is a huge game. and it is a tough one to call, but I will be my eyes will be glued to this TV on Tuesday night watching this game.
Well, before we do the score predictions, and for those watching on Facebook, X, and YouTube, please do get your score predictions in. West Ham lost 11 home league games in 2025. Really poor home record. Their joint most ever in a calendar year. However, they have not lost their first home league game in a year since 2017, and that was against Manchester United, and they won 6 and drew 2 since. Gareth, I think that record is going to continue, that poor home record, and I'm going to go for a 1-0 Nottingham Forest win. I tell you what, I was quite surprised on how bad West Ham were against Wolves, and as I said earlier, I think that Wolves could have scored quite a few more. And you're talking about a team that hadn't won a game all season, and it took them until the 20th game of this Premier League campaign, and they made it look very, very easy against West Ham. So I think Forest are going to win this game and get back to winning ways.
Well, Chris, you're the stats man, but I'll give you a stat around that game on Saturday. Wolves have only won 3 games in all competitions this season. 2 of them were against West Ham, because they won 2 games in the League Cup, and West Ham are one of them. So Wolves have beat West Ham twice this season. So that tells you how bad West Ham are at the moment. I agree. I think Nottingham Forest get back to winning ways. And judging by the league table, we know Leeds are doing well. That would put West Ham in a really precarious position. So I'm going to go for a 2-1 Forest one. But I'll just ask you a question. Is this Nuno's last game if the result is what we're saying it is?
I think so. So. Yeah.
It's interesting to see what they do then, where they go.
And like you said, how weird football works sometimes, of that being his last game against West Ham, and then it could be his last game against Forest. It's just, football works in a really weird way sometimes.
Yeah, 100%.
Right, Tottenham Hotspur travel to Bournemouth on Wednesday evening. Bournemouth are in 15th place in the Premier League table. Spurs are 13th. This is a 7:30 p.m. kickoff on Wednesday, the 7th of January. Bournemouth have 23 points from the opening 20 games. Spurs have 27 points from the opening 20 games. Now, Spurs are 13th, but we are only 4 points away from the top 5. Now, Spurs are unbeaten in their last 3 games, a 1-0 win at Palace, a 0-0 draw away at Brentford, and a 1-1 home draw against Sunderland. Boos, though, in the last 2 draws and the last 2 games. Antoine Semenyo is expected to play for the hosts, as his situation hasn't changed as yet, amid speculation about a move to the Etihad to sign for Manchester City. Javi Simmons will return to the Spurs squad, having been suspended for the last 3 games following a red card against Liverpool at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. Mohamed Kudus will miss this game. He went off injured after 19 minutes in the Sunderland 1-1 draw. He went for a scan on Monday, and we are awaiting those results and further information if he's going to miss any more matches. Now, Bournemouth's last win in the Premier League, what an amazing stat this is. Their last win in the Premier League, 26th of October. That was a 2-0 win against Nottingham Forest at home. Now, in November, they've drawn 1 game, lost 3. In December, they've drawn 4, they've lost 2. And so far in January, their last game, they lost 3-2 at home against Arsenal. So their last 11 games since that last win in the Premier League, 5 draws, 6 defeats. Gareth, first of all, talk me through the last 3 games. Palace, Brentford, Sunderland. As I said, there have been boos in 2 of these games. The Spurs fans certainly weren't happy in the away end in the 0-0 draw, away at Brentford. And then Sunderland, the 1-1 draw at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium just a couple of days ago. Boos again at the final whistle. What have you made of Spurs and Thomas Frank?
I'll start with a positive, and I haven't been giving out too many positives in recent weeks. We're unbeaten in 2026, or we're unbeaten since that Palace game. That is the only positive that I can take from this sort of money run of games. You called out the points difference there, the 4 for 5th place. And over the last sort of few weeks, I've been kind of hanging on to hope that if we more than expectation, to be honest, because I have to, there's no point lying about it. Performances on the pitch don't lead you to think there's going to be an upturn in form. But I've been kind of hanging on to hope that maybe it will get slightly better. Maybe we'll get some players in January. Maybe Solanke and Kulusevski will be back in January. But all I can see over the last 2 games especially is missed opportunities. Every other team around us has dropped points and we're no closer. We had 2 very winnable fixtures after Crystal Palace. Brentford didn't do anything in the game. Yes, we didn't do anything, but a good Spurs team goes there and wins, I think. I know Brentford have gone to Everton and brilliant performance. Fair play to them. Sunderland in that first half were so there for the taking to be 2 or 3 goals up. We didn't capitalise. And we got what we deserved. I think you would be lying to yourself as a Spurs fan if you felt we deserved any more than 5 points out of those 3 games. Crystal Palace, did we do enough there to really win? Defended quite well, but didn't create an awful lot. We had a couple of disallowed goals that were way offside that really should have been called in live play. How it got the VAR, having the disallow them was a bit of a mystery because they were both clearly offside. So you think about what chances we created in those games, there wasn't an awful lot. Maybe a couple of half chances towards the end of the Palace game. The Brentford game, I can't really.
How did Bear hit the post?
Yeah, towards the end of the game, a couple of half chances, but even that chance that he had, I think he struck it from the edge of the box. So it wasn't like it was a gilt-edged opportunity. The Sunderland game, we had them where they wanted it. We'll start with the Brentford game first. I can't really remember an opportunity in the match. And the Sunderland game, it was the better of the 3 performances, in my opinion. We could have been out of sight in that first half. We had more quality in the final third. Didn't create an awful lot, but we had opportunities to create, and we didn't make the most of those opportunities. And I think Sunderland rightly got their equaliser in that second half. They deserved something from the game. It was a great goal that he scored, but we had a couple of warning shots before that. I felt that Thomas Frank went negative in the second half with his style of play, with his teams, even with his substitutions. He went quite negative. And look, I can't sit here and argue any more of a case for the manager and the team. They didn't deserve any more than them 5 points out of those 3 games.
Gareth, it was a very positive first half. I think that's very, very fair to say. It was a very positive first half because, how many times have we said on this channel and on these streams and on the Spurs Chat Podcast, etc., when we do the after-match shows, when we talk about XG figures, when we talk about shots on target, we've had so many games this season, particularly at home, where we've had 1 shot on target in a whole half or even in a whole game. Lack of creativity. Thomas Frank promised creativity and, to be on the front foot. We certainly were. The players were actually applauded off at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium after the opening 45 minutes, and we should have put that game to bed. And what a contrast, because after the 90 minutes, the players and Thomas Frank were then booed, which, it seems to be, a really sad reality. It seems to be very normal that the fans keep booing the team and Thomas Frank off now. So I do take that as a positive, that opening 45 minutes, but you're absolutely right. We should have put that game to bed. We had lots of opportunities, but that is definitely a positive that we created a lot more.
We created opportunities. They create better opportunities. I don't think we had clear-cut opportunities in the Sunderland game. Yes, there was more of a progressiveness about us. We got into good positions, but I think a lack of quality and a lack of confidence let us down. It's not like the Sunderland keeper was making save after save. It wasn't like we were bombarding them with opportunities. I think where we are at, Chris, and I think we spoke about this on the previous episode, that, was there a misbalance or an unbalance in fans' expectations to where the team is at the moment? I don't really think there is, because I think Saturday or Sunday proved it against Sunderland that the team was applauded off after the first 45 minutes. But I think if that 45 minutes had happened in the Poch era, we would have said it wasn't that good of a performance. But I think as where we are as a club, we've kind of accepted that as a good performance. So
fair comment.
So I think the fans have been very, very patient with this. Yes, there's been a lot of boos, but I think they've been very patient in terms of a lot of fans accepted that as an improvement and a better first half performance. But in previous seasons, that would have been seen as a pretty poor first half that we didn't capitalise on good opportunities. So Then you go to the second half, and that's kind of more of what we've been used to this season. And there was only one team ever looked like scoring the second goal in that second half, and it was Sunderland. And we had enough warning shots. And I find it very difficult to argue that Sunderland didn't deserve their point. And this is an under-strength Sunderland team, Chris. Let's be honest. Fair play to them. They're hard to beat, and you have to give them credit for that. But it was nowhere near Sunderland's best team. Yes, we're missing players too, but
yeah,
Sunderland's issues have been more recent in terms of players just leaving. So you would imagine that would have a bigger impact on us missing Madison and We've missed them all season, so we should have been able to navigate through. Whereas these players they've been missing has come in recent future, in the recent past. So very disappointing Christmas, because I think any good Spurs team comes out of that with 9 points. And I don't mean a Pochettino Spurs team playing their best. I mean like an average Spurs team, I think, comes out with 9 points or minimum 7. I think this is a below average manager, a below average squad of players, and a below average mentality, Chris. And I don't really see it improving in the near future. And that is the sad indictment of where we are at the moment as a football club. I think it's a huge week. Bournemouth, we've praised them a lot, but they're a team, as you said, haven't won a game for 11 Premier League matches. Then we've got Aston Villa in the FA Cup. If we come out of this week, out of the FA Cup, and further behind in the race for Europe, it doesn't gear you up for the first half of the 2026 season between now and May, that there is going to be any positivity or there's going to be any sense of excitement that something could happen. The Europa League, in a way, last year was always the out that maybe we could do something in that. I think everyone knows we're nowhere near ready to compete in the Champions League. So if we go to the FA Cup, is it going to be just about trying to maybe script European Conference League football for next season? And that is not what, as fans, is kind of what we expected this season. We expected a massive improvement in the league. We expected, because of Thomas Frank's reputation, that a lot of players at the club would improve. I've yet to see any improvement in any of these players. And the football has regressed in a lot of ways. And people keep mentioning about us being better defensively. The stats don't say that. We've conceded as many goals as we have under Ange. So I'm a bit lost as the what there is to look forward to. I've seen today, we spoke about it at the top of the show, that there's been managers being sacked. And I'm thinking, well, where's the evidence that Thomas Frank's going to be a success? Why should we continue on like this? So it's just a really difficult situation to be in as a fan, that you should be looking forward to every game. But over that Christmas period, under different managers, under different teams, we would have mopped up and made ground. This season, you just think every game's going to be a tough battle. And we spoke about Bournemouth, Chris, in the past, and I think Bournemouth are favourites for this game, and they haven't won a match for 11 games. How can that be, as a Tottenham fan?
Gareth, we have had a lot of downs this season. That is a very fair comment. But one positive that we can take is that we are, although Spurs are 13th at the moment in the Premier League table, we're only 4 points away from the top 5. This second half of the season needs to be a lot better. Now, of course, we don't know how long Mohamed Kudus is out for, and he is, a very important player for Spurs, because the ball very, very often goes out to the right. Now, what have you made of Bournemouth this season? We played them on the 30th of August at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. We lost 1-0. Now, previous meetings in all competitions, played 18, Spurs have won 11, Bournemouth have won 4, and 3 games have finished as a draw. You mentioned there about they haven't won since October. What have you made of them recently? Because Andoni Iraola, fantastic manager, we've praised him, ever since we've started doing these shows. He's done a really good job there at Bournemouth. His team always gives it a go. What sort of game are you expecting on Wednesday?
This is going to sound pretty crazy based on the stats and where Bournemouth are in the table. I think this is possibly our toughest game for a long time in the league. I think when we played Liverpool, of course, they're a bigger club than Bournemouth, champions last season. But I think Bournemouth are going to give us a lot more problems. I've watched them enough, of course, under Andoni Iraola, but I've actually watched their last 2 games from minute 1 to minute 90. I've seen everything against Chelsea. I've seen everything against Arsenal. They went toe-to-toe with Arsenal on Saturday. Toe-to-toe. They didn't sit back. They pressed Arsenal, forced them on the mistakes. You think about that, the first goal Gabriel gives away. You don't see that from Gabriel because he felt under pressure of how Bournemouth started the game. The little patterns of play, the chances they create, the attacking prowess they have, they tend to have a lot of dribblers and they're risk takers, Chris. And I think they've just been on an unfortunate run where defensively we know they're not strong enough. They haven't got that same back four they had last year. But I think if you're a Bournemouth fan, you must be so excited with the style of play and that there's a lot of goals in the games. They create a lot of chances. There was a stat in the game on Saturday since Gabriel equalised from the 18th minute to the 47th minute, which was the second minute of added time when the whistle went. Arsenal hadn't had a shot in 29 minutes against them. And this is the Arsenal team that are running away with the Premier League at the moment. And Bournemouth put them under that much pressure. So I think they've been unlucky that they haven't got some more points, some more wins in that run. Yes, they've had some bad ones. You think about the 4-1 at Brentford, the 4-0 at Villa. They've had some bad. Every team has bad days. But I think if it's the same kind of performance level we've seen over the last few weeks, Bournemouth are probably going to break their duck in terms of getting a win because they're a better team than the league table suggests. I can't really say that we are 13th is probably where we should be. I think Bournemouth are a far better footballing team than Spurs at the moment, by far.
Gareth, Thomas Frank bigged up Bournemouth and said that Bournemouth are actually one of the best sides in the Premier League at pressing. He then went on to say, actually, they could be the best team in the Premier League at pressing. Andoni Iraola's side, like I said, they always give it a go and they can play some very entertaining football. And what I said at the start, Antoine Semenyo is expected to play against us. Who are the key players for Bournemouth? Who are you afraid of with us playing against them?
Well, I always think when we play teams, there's maybe 2 or 3 players they worry about, especially over this last few weeks because we haven't been playing the strongest teams in the league. But if Semenyo plays, he's obviously a massive threat, and it would be typical for him to score in his last game against us for Bournemouth, wouldn't it? Kluivert, I think, is a brilliant player. Of course, Patrick is his father. Justin Kluivert's a very, very good player. Krippy's been one of the breakouts of the season. Scored that goal against Arsenal, of course. And the fact that he's not even in the starting 11 tells you that their options in attack are strong. I think Evan Nilsson's as a massive threat up front. The left back they signed to replace Kerkez, Trupper, I think it is called Trupper. He's a very good player. Midfield, they've got real quality in James Tavernier. The player that had, and what a story this is, David Brooks, the recovery from David Brooks, who had the cancer. He looks back to his best. As you can tell, Chris, sometimes I rhyme off teams and can only name you 2. I'm a big Bournemouth sort of supporter in terms of how they play, and I could go through the whole team. I think they're a fantastic watch, and most weeks I be cheering Bournemouth to win because they're probably my favourite team in the league to watch. Of course, this game will be different being a Tottenham fan, but I think if it's the same kind of Spurs team that's been showing up, Chris, we're going to be in big trouble in this game because I do think Bournemouth are due a win, and their performances against Chelsea and Arsenal deserve more than 1 point. So they are going to be a real test for this Tottenham team.
Gareth, what about these stats here? Bournemouth are winless in their last 7 midweek games in the Premier League or played on Tuesday, Wednesday and Thursday. Drawn 3, lost 4, having won 7 of their previous 8, drawing 1.
Last one was against Tottenham, wasn't it?
And then Tottenham are winless in their last 10 midweek Premier League games, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, drawing 3 and losing 7, their longest run in the competition. Their last victory was in January 24 against Brentford. Do you read much into these sorts of stats or not?
Funny, I do think that Bournemouth's last midweek one was against Tottenham. I think it was Thursday. I think it was around this time last season. When Ange got a lot of stick off the fans. I believe that was a Thursday night game. So that may
that was a proper confrontation with the away fans. Yeah.
Yeah. What area? I don't know. I mean, how can it differ what day of the week you're playing on? Or I just think that tells you where we are, Chris. I think if you look at a lot of our records recently, if we play on a Monday or Tuesday or Wednesday, we haven't won that many games, so it probably all looks bad. I just feel that Bournemouth have been very unfortunate with this recent run. And look, I don't watch Bournemouth every week. I try and watch them when I can, but I've watched enough of them games between October and now. They realise that they should have won some of those games, and I can't think back to the last game I watched involving Tottenham where they haven't won and thought we should have won. I don't feel like that anymore. Even when there was games under Ange Postecoglou at times where we didn't won, and I was thinking we should have won. Haven't really felt that under Thomas Frank, and I think that's a big worry. As you can tell, Chris, I don't have much confidence for this game. But look, the only thing I would say about Bournemouth is they're one of these teams that create a lot of chances and aren't clinical. They tend not to take a lot of their chances, and they give you chances at the back.
Yeah.
But I think if Bournemouth take their chances, they'll be comfortable winners.
Well, so far this Premier League campaign, Bournemouth have scored 31 Premier League goals, Tottenham 28. Now, Tottenham are averaging 9.9 shots per game in the Premier League this season. That's 198 shots in 20 games. The only season on Opta's records where they have averaged below 11 per match, and that was 1997-98. Let me give you some more stats here. Average goals per game this season, Bournemouth 2, Tottenham 1. Average goals conceded per match, Bournemouth 2, Tottenham 1. XG, what about this, Gareth, for a stat? XG, Bournemouth 31.68 to Tottenham's 19.28. XG per 90, Bournemouth 1.58 and Tottenham 0.96. Now, Darren England will referee this game. Jared Gillett will be VAR. And also what I wanted to talk about is Sky Sports published some fantastic stats here. And this is, very clear where the problems are in midfield for Tottenham, because passes by midfielders, and I mean progressive passes. Now, in the Crystal Palace game, the whole of the Tottenham Hotspur midfield in the entire game, 4. Adam Wharton on his own, 10. In the Brentford game, Tottenham Hotspur midfield, 7. Jordan Henderson on his own, 10. In the Sunderland game, Tottenham midfield, 5. Granit Xhaka, 7 on his own.
Do you know what the scariest thing about that is? And it's not even just the numbers; it's the actual player they've picked. Adam Wharton, Jordan Henderson, and Granit Xhaka are number 6s. They're not even attacking players. They're like sitting in front of the back 4. So like that is the most damning stat. I seen the stat obviously last night because I was watching the Super Sunday Extra Time, and I think Jamie Carragher raised a really good point. He says he analysed the Spurs Chelsea game on I think it was the 1st of November on the Monday Night Football afterwards, and says we thought it might have been an issue with Pellegrini and Bentancur. He says maybe I was wrong because they've had different midfield setups in some of these games. Archie Gray's been on there, Pellegrini's been on there with Bentancur. We've had Bergville come on there and play in the Sunderland game off the bench, and yet it's the same issue. So all these players are doing very similar things. So that aligns with what they must be doing what the manager wants. Don't be playing any risky passes. Keep it very safe. Keep it very secure. Let's slow the game down. Let's try and play the ball in behind. And we really are. How could I describe it? We're so weak in our ability to get on the ball and create and play with bravery or play with any. I watch some of those Bournemouth players against Arsenal, Chris. Up against Declan Rice, up against Martin Odegaard, up against Zubimendi, possibly the strongest 3 in the midfield of any Premier League team at the moment. Pains me to say it, but it's probably true. Taking the ball under pressure, taking the ball on the back foot, taking it off their defenders and trying to play through it. And at times they did lose the ball, but other times they played through them and created opportunities. Thank you very much, JMD. The word is inept. Yeah, we're very inept of getting on the ball and doing those kind of things. And a lot of people will say the players aren't good enough, Chris. And look, it's obvious we need reinforcements if we're going to challenge near the top end of the league. But we've seen these players under previous coaches be better in those situations. So why all of a sudden has it became that it's kind of like an area we don't want to explore? Lucas Bergville for me is a player at his best, getting on the ball and playing forward. Bentancur is a player of getting on the half turn and playing the ball forward. They do not suit this kind of safe passage of keeping the ball, and then a lot of the times it ends up back at the goalkeeper How many times the ball went backwards in that second half against Sunderland? And what does Vicario do? He puts his foot through it and the other half of the pitch, and it then becomes a physical battle with Richarlison and the defender, and half the time the ball goes out of play. So I don't really know what the plan is when we have the ball, what we're actually trying to do. And everyone will say that every manager needs time. But Chris, we're 6 months into this now. Why are we not seeing any signs, any glimpses that, this is what it could be in a few months' time? To me, it looks like we're going nowhere, absolutely nowhere. And it all very feels much like from the club, the manager, the players, that it's just about trying to get through to the end of the season without any sort of significant damage. Because if the club had any aspirations, in my opinion, of getting into Europe for next season, they would make this change now, and even if it means getting an interim in. We're hearing that Michael Carrick could be going to Man United after these couple of games that Darren Fletcher gets. I think Michael Carrick would be a very good interim manager at the end of the season. Spurs connection, plays attacking football, had a really successful spell with Middlesbrough, albeit in the Championship, but done really well there. He had that sort of 5 or 6 weeks in the job after Ole Gunnar Solskjaer was sacked at Man United. So he's used to working. He's been in that environment to coming in a difficult situation, and he had a decent spell there after Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. So the fact that we're not doing anything, and the more I think about it now, Chris, I'll be very surprised if we don't any business in January, because I think there is a realization from probably the board that this probably won't continue on with Thomas Frank past the end of the season. So unless they're going to sign players over his head, which puts the manager in a very difficult situation, why would he stay up? He has a feeling that he's not going to be back. He's not going to be having a say in the transfers. I would be very shocked if we don't. We might do a wee bit of business, but I'd be shocked if we don't any significant business now, because I do think they probably realise with Thomas Frank that it probably won't go beyond this season. And as you said, Chris, if we're seeing these stats, the Opta stats, you're saying it's the worst for shots on goal since 1996, 97. They've got all them stats in front. They've got all them stats as well. So we're struggling to kind of come up with positives. I don't know what the board can come up with as a positive at the moment.
And it's not like we're trying to find negatives here, because these stats are being published week by week, and they are pretty terrible. Gareth, just tell me, should I just give up in asking you whether you think things will improve under Thomas Frank, or should I shut up?
Look, it's not for the want of it wanting to improve. I would love Thomas Frank to turn this around. I would love to see more wins, more progressive football, more shots. I mean, I can't remember who it was, Chris, but somebody put into the chat, oh my God, we've had a shot on goal in the first minute, because it was like almost feeling like it never happens.
I told you in the last episode, you said, what do you want? And I said, I want to see a shot early on. First minute.
I think the expectations levels are so low at the moment. There's a lot of empty seats. Funny enough, I'll tell you a quick story. My one of my mates is a Liverpool fan and has girlfriend's family are Tottenham fans from Ireland here. So he went over as a guest for the Sunderland game. They've done the hospitality, and he says to me, "Great stadium, great food, great drinks, but no atmosphere. Football was crap, and you wonder where you're going as a club. You expect it much more." And I think a lot of that is the general opinion of us at the minute, that the best thing about the club is probably the stadium, the food, the drinks, the concerts, the NFL. The manager's not good enough. The team's probably not good enough. And I think the one thing as a fan, Chris, and we've referenced this with Bournemouth, I think if Spurs were playing a similar way to Bournemouth, yes, the results haven't been good enough, but you can see Bournemouth getting out of this losing run very, very quickly.
You can see they give it a go, and you can see signs in games.
And we're not seeing any of that.
I agree.
Tottenham. And also as well, we didn't sell 3 of our best players in the summer. They've sold their whole back 4. And they haven't got the finances or the status of a Tottenham, but yet they're still able to do what they do, and that's give everybody a game most weeks. And the performances against Chelsea and Arsenal, who are better teams than Tottenham, if they replicate that on Wednesday, and Spurs are kind of the same they've been all season, you can really only see one winner, Chris.
Gareth, of course, Javi Simmons is returning to the Tottenham Hotspur squad, so it will give Thomas Frank another attacking option, which is great. Predicted lineup. Who do you think will? Do you think many changes will happen under Frank, because he made a couple of changes against Sunderland? Of course, Ben Davies came in. I don't think a lot of people expected that, but he came out and said in the press conference that he wanted a left footer in that game. I've said for months now, since the start of the season, it's very, very hard to predict a Thomas Frank starting 11 in any game. Very, very hard. If you were to give it a go, predicted 11 for this Bournemouth game?
I think if there's ever a time he's going to play Van de Ven left back, this will be the game, because we know Bournemouth are very tricky players in that attacking area, especially if you've got Semenyo on one side, who normally plays on the right hand side. Semenyo against Ben Davies gives you nightmares. You would be up all night thinking about that. I think Ben Davies would be up all night thinking about that. I would like to see Spence go on at right back, Van de Ven at left back, bring Kevin Danzo on beside Romero for this game. I think Van de Ven could nullify Semenyo. And as well, if Semenyo moves to the left-hand side, I think Jed Spence is a better defender than Porro. So I don't want to sound like Thomas Frank here and think about the opposition, but I think because we're in such a bad way at the moment that we do need to think about the opposition. So I would go with Spence, Van de Ven at fullback, Danzo, Romero, Vicario's in goal. Palhinha's a funny one, Chris. I've not been impressed with him recently at all. So I think Bentancur will definitely play. I would like to see Bergville go on beside him. And I would like to see Xavi Simmons play in front of those two. Then on the right, I would probably play... We're stuck for options on the right now. We could Austin Johnson. You'd probably just have to play Odebear out there. And then I would go with Tell on the left. And I think because of his performances recently, you can't really make a case for Miani. Thought he was poor again against Sunderland, albeit out of position. So I'd probably have to play Richarlison through the middle. Look, that our options at the minute are not good, but it's still not an excuse for Thomas Frank to be, the football on offer is really, really poor.
Gareth, a quick one for you. You didn't exactly give glowing reports for Palhinha and Kolo Muani. Would you sign both or either of them or one of them for on a permanent deal?
I think the issue with Palhinha is that he should be a squad player. That if you are an attacking team and you're a few goals up and the other team maybe comes on, you bring him on and you see it at the game. But the way we're playing, that hasn't been the case. So Palhinha's been coming on in games where it's 1-1 or 0-0, and he's not going to change the game for you. He's not that type of player. So It's not a criticism of him. I just don't think his strengths are being utilised really with how we are as a group. I think if you put him under that Man City team as kind of a deputy for Rodri, say Rodri's playing 60 minutes, you're managing these minutes with his injuries, Man City are 2-0 up, you bring Palhinha in to see the game out. We're not in that position as a club at the moment. So I don't really see... We haven't really seen the best of him. Kolo Muani, I've been very unimpressed. I thought he started okay when he came back from that injury. There was positives despite him not scoring a goal. I think back that Copenhagen game, he played really well and he didn't score, but he was heavily involved. The PSG game was obviously a positive, but just haven't seen enough. What I will say is for these strikers, and Richarlison included, I know a lot of Tottenham fans have made their minds up with Richarlison, but he's not getting any service, Chris. I mean, what? I don't think Erling Haaland would do well on this team because he would be starved of opportunity. So maybe it's unfair to judge him, but from what I've seen of him, no, I wouldn't keep Miani on. I would send him back.
Gareth, lastly, score prediction for this one: Bournemouth Spurs on Wednesday.
I just think on the law of averages, Chris, the way Bournemouth have been playing, they're due a one sooner or later, and I think this might be the game. They get that one. I have no confidence in us. I would love to be more positive, but I think Bournemouth will win 3-1.
If Spurs do not play in a positive way, and we don't get a positive result, I feel like a lot of Spurs fans at the moment are really questioning Thomas Frank and our style. Like I
Well,
said,
Chris, this will be the damning thing. I don't think Bournemouth will allow you Tottenham. I think they will be all over us. If we play the ball to the back, they are going to press us so far up the pitch
yeah,
that we're going to be resigned to counter attack, because I think Bournemouth are more used to getting on the ball and playing. We're not used to doing that. So I think it is going to be very much Bournemouth coming at us, and we'll try and play for set pieces and counter attacks. But the one thing I'd like to say, Chris, is how can that be accepted at a top club that Bournemouth are better on the ball, better at pressing,
yeah.
better in the transitions, and that we have to rely on set pieces? It should be the other way about. The Bournemouth are relying on set pieces to beat us.
What I was going to say, Gareth, is the fact that we went 0-0 away at Brentford. The fans booed Thomas Frank. We've drawn 1-1 against Sunderland at home. The fans booed the team and Thomas Frank. What I was going to say is, if we don't get a positive result, then I've no doubt that will continue. And, Thomas Frank at the moment needs to build a better relationship with the fans, in my opinion. So the only way he's going to do that is show positivity, in our style of play, and win football matches.
I think if it goes the way that I'm expecting to go, I think Thomas Frank's job will be in the line against Aston Villa on Saturday. I feel if we lose to Bournemouth, and I think if we do lose to Bournemouth, Chris, it'll be a damaging one, because I think all the stats will be in Bournemouth's favour. I think if we're going to win this game, it's going to be that Vicario has a good game. We defend really well, and we maybe nick a goal from a set piece. You've seen enough from the Spurs team. They know we're not going to go out and dominate Bournemouth. If you think back to the home game against Bournemouth, they absolutely dominated that match and should have won by 3 or 4 goals. So Bournemouth have a certain way of playing that I think if we win, it'll be a scrappy one where we nick a goal and we defend really well, or maybe get a bit of luck, or Vicario has a good game. So I think if we lose, the stats will be so much in Bournemouth's favour that it will be a boo from the away end. It will be negative. And I think that'll put all the pressure on the Villa game on Saturday, because I think most fans have accepted our only real chance of winning a trophy this season now is the FA Cup. And if we lose to Villa, which I also think it'll probably be an under-strength Villa team, they'll probably make some changes because of where they are in the league. They'll feel that they may still have an outside chance of the Premier League. They're still very much favourites for the Europa League. They may feel that the FA Cup could be a distraction. So it may be an under-strength or a rotated Villa team. I think if we lose at home to Villa, I think his position becomes very difficult, because there is a 7-day break between Villa and the West Ham in the Premier League. I think that'll be the ideal time for the club to maybe make a change. Whether they do it or not, I don't know. But I think his position will be very, very difficult to continue on if Bournemouth and Villa are nasty defeats.
Yeah, and we certainly don't want to see, as Spurs fans, Gareth, us going to Bournemouth and trying to play for a draw like we did away at Brentford, and Vicario getting booked with 20-odd minutes to go. And we certainly don't want to see that. We want to see the attacking intent. We want to see Spurs go for it. As we've both said, we know that Bournemouth are going to go for it, especially at home, and they play some great football, and their press is extremely good, as Thomas Frank has admitted himself. I'm going to go for a high-scoring draw. I'm going to go for a 2-2 or even a 3-3, but I'm hoping that Spurs deliver and win. I know you're smiling as if to say, "Don't be silly," but yeah, I think that it's going to be an entertaining game, and I'm just hoping that Spurs do go for it, because, as I said, if we don't, then I feel like there's going to be even more pressure and even more noise from the away end, and it could result in another confrontation like last year.
There's a great comment here from one of the viewers at Bod the Cap. If our last match against Bournemouth was a boxing match, the ref would have stopped it after 60 minutes. And I feel that it probably will be a bit like that on Wednesday night. I think we will be on the ropes. I think if we are going to win, it's going to be a 1-0 scrappy, but like Palace, where we defended quite well. I'd be very surprised if we go there and 1-3-2. I just don't see that with the Spurs team anymore. I don't think we're that type of team.
Gareth, let me just ask you this very quickly. If we do lose this game and it's a poor performance, do you think that Thomas Frank will still go over to the away end like he did after the Brentford game. And, when you hear the away fans boo you, and it was for him directly, I looked at him and he looked shocked that the fans were booing him. And then, of course, going down the tunnel at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium after 1-1 draw at Sunderland, he looked really upset, the fact that, fans did boo him. So if you were Thomas Frank, would you actually go over to the away end if it is even if it's a draw, but it's a really poor performance, would you still go over? Because I don't think I've ever known a time, even at Brentford, win, lose or draw, no matter what the result is, whether they've won 3 or 4-0 or whether they've lost 3 or 4-0, Thomas Frank does exactly the same thing over and over again. And you can see some of these players, sometimes the players are thinking, oh no, I don't want to be going over to the away end. No way. You could tell that Romero was just about to walk over to the away end at the Brentford game, and you could tell some of the players are like, oh no, I don't want to do that. And Romero's looking back as if to say, come on, we've got to do this. And they did, but I tell you, the atmosphere won't be good.
I think you're getting too good at this game, Chris. You've answered the question there, inside the question. You've mentioned that he could do it at Brentford, but this is Tottenham Hotspur. This is a totally different level, and I think that's been one of the things that Thomas Frank has struggled with. Of course, he knows that Tottenham is a bigger club than Brentford, but it's almost like he's lost in the feeling of myself. You know myself, Chris. I coach football, and sometimes you do say things, do things, behave in a certain way because you get lost in the game, or that sort of feeling of being involved in a game. And it almost feels like when he went over at Brentford, he probably in his head thought this was a great point against a team that are great at home. We made it difficult for them, but that just isn't the Spurs way, and that was never going to be accepted. Being under pressure against Brentford, stopping the game, slowing the game down, time wasting. Fans don't want to see that. So I don't know where he thinks that we should be, grateful that he's come in and maybe to coach a team that can howl out away at Brentford for a result. But funny enough, Alex Crook from TalkSport, I think it was the day after the game, says that Ange Postecoglou was incapable of going to Brentford and getting, dogging out a result. They won there 2-0 last season. So I don't buy into all this nonsense that, we should be grateful that, we're a bit more disciplined and there's nothing to enjoy about these performances. And we're no better off in the table. All right, we were 17th, we're 13th now, but is 13th any better than 17th? That's still unacceptable for me as a Tottenham fan to be where we are. And
I posed this question to somebody on the fan show yesterday, that if I'd have said to you, Gareth, as a Spurs fan at the very start of the season, after 20 games, we will be only 4 points away from the top 5, right? Forget that we're 13th. We'll be 4 points away from the top 5. I think you'd have taken that. The fact that this league is so tight, we are only 4 points away from the top 5. So, grab that opportunity.
Let's go through the teams, Chris. Right? Liverpool. What do you think? Do you think they're a good team at the minute?
They're so up and down.
Chelsea, up and down.
Yeah.
Sunderland, newly promoted team. Newcastle, up and down. Brentford, up and down.
You can't predict any of these results, exactly.
We're there by default. It's not as if, if this had been a great Premier League renewal and we're winning 3 weeks out of 4 and we're sitting 4 points off, you'd have a totally different outlook to where you are. It's how we're going about it. It almost reminds me of being, I'm from Ireland. When I watch the national team, the football is so poor. We play for set pieces. We play long balls, direct balls. We sit back and allow the bigger nations come on to us. And it's great when we get a result, but it's not pretty to watch. And I kind of feel that it's almost like I'm watching Ireland every week with the Spurs team. We never seem to be able to dominate an opponent. And that is not how it has been in my lifetime as supporting Spurs. We've always been an exciting team to watch for most of my life. We've always been a team that played in the front foot. We were brave, stupid at times, naive at times, of course. But this trade-off that we're getting, that we're playing this way, it's not giving us any better results. We're no better than we were last year, in my opinion. If not, I think we're worse.
Gareth, I'm going to leave you this. Tottenham have scored at least twice in 4 of their 8 Premier League away games against Bournemouth, winning all 4 of those. However, they have failed to score in each of the other 4, drawing 2 and losing 2. So I'm going to go for a 2-2, but I'm hoping that Spurs will nick it 3-2. Richie, knee slide over by the away end. Scenes at the end would be great, wouldn't it?
As long as he doesn't take his top off before the final whistle, because you know what happens there. Bournemouth scored. Bournemouth score then. It's funny, I seen Cody Gakpo do that, and I thought, oh my God, he had a Richarlison moment where he took his top off against Fulham, and then Fulham, of course, scored.
Right. So please do put your score predictions in the comments section below, and let's hope the Spurs do pick up the 3 points on Wednesday away at Bournemouth. Right, Gareth, let's go to the next one. Brentford against Sunderland. Now, Brentford are up to 7th in the Premier League table. Sunderland 8th. Of course, Sunderland just drew 1-1 at the Tottenham Hotspur Stadium. An impressive win for Brentford again.
You know, I really fancied Everton to win this game. But a really impressive performance, as you say, from Brentford. I think we referenced this player before, Igor Thiago. He got a hat-trick. Looks a real handful. And as Match today pointed out, Brentford just keep finding goal scorers after players leave. I think he's built up a really good relationship with Kevin Shara. Look, no secret of my allegiance to Ireland. I've been very I've been praising Keith Andrews quite a lot. I think he's done a brilliant job there. I actually think Brentford are more attacking under Keith Andrews than they probably were under Thomas Frank there. But you know, they took the game day more teams than not. You know, if I think back to that second half, they played Spurs on. Brentford weren't happy for a point. They kind of went at Tottenham thinking we can win this. So I think Keith Andrews has done a brilliant job there. They're a really strong team at home. Beat Bournemouth 4-1, of course, before they played Tottenham. And that result against Everton on Sunday was possibly their most impressive result of the season, because Everton have been decent at home. And he played a different formation that was pointed out by Jamie Carragher. He played that sort of tight diamond formation in midfield, and it caught Everton by surprise. And Shara and we mentioned that Igor up front formed a brilliant partnership, but they were ruthless. They took their chances, and Brentford are 7th in the Premier League table, having an unbelievable season. And Chris, with their home form, and we know no team enjoys going there, if they can get a few more points on the road, maybe they might get their ticket into Europe and they one of those the Conference League. So I think that will be an incredible story for Brentford. And you'd have to say, on previous seasons, I think they've missed out twice by one place. They probably deserve a goal in Europe.
So you've just said, you've used the word incredible. Brentford have had an incredible season. They're only 3 points above Spurs.
Yeah, but Brentford and Spurs are on different wavelengths in terms of club. And you also have the factor that Brentford lost their manager, who has been a massive influence in what they've been doing. They've lost their captain, who went to Arsenal, Norgard. They've lost Mbeumo, their best player, going to Man United. Previous to that, they lost Ivan Toney, their best striker. And yet, they're still going in the same direction. Whereas Tottenham, you know, we keep mentioning about injuries, Chris, but Maddison was been injured for lots of last season. Kulusevski's been injured for a lot of his Spurs career. So why do we keep making excuses, whereas these other clubs continue to find alternatives to problems? And if we had a summer like Brentford, where we lost, you know, I'm trying to think back, if we lost Pochettino, Harry Kane, Son, all in one window, we'd all be panicking. Brentford tend to find a way through it. And you have to give the recruitment a massive the directors involved, the owners, the recruitment team, a massive round of applause. And you'd also have to give a lot of credit to the manager, Keith Andrews. He has embraced a very difficult situation there. And in my opinion, Brentford are a lot more positive as a group as well. I don't think Brentford are missing Thomas Frank at all.
Now, this is just the second time Brentford have hosted Sunderland in a league game in the 21st century, following a 3-3 draw in the Championship back in October 2017. Gareth, score prediction time. I'm going to go with a 1-1 draw. What are you going to go for?
2-1 Brentford.
Okay, so they'll climb up that Premier League table yet again. Right, the next one, Crystal Palace host Aston Villa at Selhurst Park on Wednesday, 7:30. Crystal Palace are down in 14th right now. Aston Villa are third. Aston Villa, of course, beat Forest 3-1. I keep asking you this. I've asked you this for the last couple of weeks. Aston Villa, title contenders?
I thought the Arsenal defeat was damaging. The manner of the defeat more than the actual result. I says on the previous prediction show that we would learn a lot about Villa with the next game against Forest, and it was a brilliant response. I think Villa are on my outside chance. I think the issue they have is they can't recruit in January. They're one of those clubs that are tied up with PSR. They can't really go out and bring players in, so they're relying on what they have. I actually think, in our case, playing Villa in the FA Cup might be a good thing, because I think they may rotate their squad because of the Premier League. You know, they're not that far off, 6 points behind Arsenal, which isn't a lot. And also the Europa League, I think they're favourites for that. And that is another opportunity into the Champions League. If their league form plays off, the Europa League, as they see me Spurs last year, is attacking into the Champions League. The FA Cup doesn't do that. Only guarantees Europa League football. So I think the FA Cup will be the least of their worries. So that may help us on Saturday. But outside chance, but I think they need to be really, really consistent over the next few weeks to make sure that gap doesn't go to 7, 8, 9 points, because I think that will be very difficult for them to turn around. They need to make sure that it goes to 4 before it goes to 8 or 9 points.
It was all going so well for Crystal Palace. Of course, they've had games coming thick and fast, including in Europe. They're down to 14th. Of course, they've just signed Brennan Johnson, making his debut at Newcastle in a defeat. Is this where he gets his first goal in a Crystal Palace shirt?
He played. I think he played 72 minutes. I looked at this before we come on. I didn't see any of the game. Of course, they were playing the same time as the Tottenham game. Look, I think I'll speak for all the Tottenham fans. We all hope Brennan Johnson does well at Crystal Palace. A lot of people have referenced him as a legend. Look, I don't know about that. He's a legend in terms of scoring a goal in the final. Scored some more big goals, of course, but I wouldn't put him under the Harry Kane or the Son bracket. But he's probably one of those players that goes down as a bit of a cult hero more than a legend for me. But cult heroes, you want to do really well. So I really hope that Johnson does get his first goal against Fulham, and he does really well for Crystal Palace. I think Oliver Glasner's the right manager for him. The worry I have with Crystal Palace, Chris, is the manager's announced he's not signing a new contract. There's a lack of squad depth there. They've got games coming thick and fast. The Conference League coming up now as well in January, the playoffs. It's going to be very difficult for them to compete. I don't know business what our business they can do now in January. They've signed Johnson. And what is the motivation, Chris, for a team that knows the manager's leaving at the end of the season? There's no real motivation there in terms of fighting for your place or trying to make. Of course, you want to do well as a player, but all these things tend to have impacts. So I do foresee a difficult second half of the season for Crystal Palace.
Yeah, we're also seeing reports about Manchester City now interested in Mark Gay as well. That's going to be an interesting one to see where he ends up.
It's heavily linked with the Man United job. He's the favourite for Man United job in the summer. Yeah. So that's another thing as well. It's going to have to be dealt with.
Gareth, back earlier on in the season on the 31st of August, Crystal Palace went to Villa Park and won this game 3-0. But this is going to be a very different result this time, isn't it?
I fancy Villa. I'm going to go for 2-1 Villa 1.
Yeah, I agree. Although, we have always bigged up Oliver Glasner, and I'm sure that he will go on to, be very, very successful as a manager.
It'll be interesting if his stock falls. If Palace go on a really bad run now, will that put teams off? Maybe he's got enough credit in the bank. I know you're a big fan.
I think so.
It'll be interesting to see, because it was only a few months ago everyone was talking about Areola, but you don't really see Areola at the minute being linked with top clubs because of the run Bournemouth's on. So I wonder, will it be the same effect with Glazer? But from what I've heard, Oliver Glasner is the favourite for the Man United job, and they really want them. So that would tell you that they don't care what happens between now and May.
I think a lot of chairmen and a lot of football owners and executives, I think they see the bigger picture and see what great jobs that these people have done with the resources that they've got available at these clubs. Also, another Wednesday game, Everton host Wolves. Can Wolves get their second win of the campaign, Gareth? Can they get out of this trouble?
Come on, Chris. Ask me the real question. Ask me the real question about Wolves. Come on.
Okay, I'll ask you a real question. How many goals are Everton going to put past Wolves?
Ask me the real question. Come on. Can Wolves what? Can Wolves what? Come on.
Can they get out of it?
No. It's too big of a gap. But when you watch Wolves on Saturday, me and you both watched the game, of course, it is hard to believe they haven't got more points because I watched them against Man United and I thought they were very good. I watched them against Tottenham, of course, in September.
They have played well in certain games, yeah.
They have played well in certain games, and it does make you think, you wonder, where's it all gone wrong? Because they look a better team to me than West Ham. They look a better team to me than Burnley. So you wonder where this discrepancy in results has come from. But I think it will be a relief, Chris, that they got their first one. That will give them some confidence. Who knows? I mean, if they go and beat Everton, there might be some internal belief that they can get out of this. Everton have just lost 4-2 at home to Brentford, so there's pressure on Everton to go and win this. Everything sort of fell into place against West Ham, though. West Ham were so bad, and I think Arias got his first goal, Mane got his first goal. I think the penalty was soft as well that they got. I think it was quite soft. But look, they deserved to win the game. But will that happen again? Will these players that score their first goal be able to go and do it again? I think it's a big ask for them to get out of this trouble. But do you know what? I hope they go down swinging. And if there's any team in that bottom three I would like to see get out of trouble, it would be Wolves. So I'd love to go and see them beat Everton and make it interesting. Because do you know what? They're a good watch, Wolves. They try to play football the right way. They go on the front foot most of the time. So no, I would love to see them get out of it, but I just think it might be a step too far. But look, won this game, and who knows?
Earlier this season, on the 30th of August, the result of Molineux was Wolves 2, Everton 3. And they then played each other on the 23rd of September in the League Cup, and Wolves won the game at 2-0. My score prediction for this one, Gareth, is the same as the reverse fixture, 3-2 to Everton.
We see goals. I actually see it being quite tight and not many goals. I'm going to go for Everton. They won by 1-0.
Okay, right. Next up is Fulham against Chelsea. Of course, West London derby at Craven Cottage. Now, at the moment, Chelsea drew 1-1 away at Manchester City. What do you make of that game?
Oh, it was like a knife to the stomach. That I really thought Man City were going to win that game and really close that gap to Arsenal. But Man City, they didn't close the game out. Chelsea, to their credit, battled. And if you look at the second half performance, it's hard to argue Chelsea didn't deserve it. They created opportunities. Neto missed a couple of chances. And if you're looking for a story, I suppose it was brilliant for the Chelsea stand-in coach. You know, that the fact that he was managing, I think it was Southampton under 18s this time last year, and he was up against Pep Guardiola. So as you said at the top of the show, Chris, football has this way of throwing stories up. You know, you mentioned about Nuno and West Ham, Forest. This was an R1 at the weekend. You know, of all the managers to be up against, and probably the only game we're hearing that Liam Senior is going to be in charge for this game. The one game he got was against Man City at Man City against Pep Guardiola. So what incredible. A story!
Yeah,
incredible, and great scenes at the end. If you're, I'm no Chelsea lover, but great scenes for football that he had his moment. But it was a big blow to Man City, and we'll speak about Man City shortly. But great point for Chelsea. But they're another team that is struggling for consistency. I mean, if they could find some consistency, they'd probably consolidate their place in the top four. For how poor Spurs have been, Chelsea haven't been able to. I think the same points gap still there to Chelsea with Spurs, and I think Chelsea are a better team. So it'll be interesting to see if they do any business in January. I think it was quite telling that the manager was only in there for one game, dropped the goalkeeper, because I don't think the goalkeeper's been good enough, Sanchez. Liam Senior is going to come on. He's a very attacking coach from what I've seen. But Chris, we know Chelsea can eat you up very quickly. We've seen that with Graham Potter. We've seen that with Roberto Di Matteo. You know, there's been managers that have done there with lack of experience and really struggled. So it will be interesting as he gets on. But from what I hear about Rosenior, very talented and upcoming coach. And I think what's very interesting, we'll probably get some confirmation about this before the game when Chelsea officially unveiled Rosenior. But this is a long-term appointment. This isn't just a short-term fix. They believe that Rosenior is the man to lead them forward. So I think that tells you everything in their confidence around Rosenior.
The Chelsea fans, especially online, Gareth, don't seem impressed, especially with all these clips going around, especially with the manager saying that he was a Manchester United fan.
Look, at the end of the day,
how would you
happens.
feel? How would you feel that a manager comes into Spurs and it wasn't long ago?
As far as Chelsea, Man United isn't a big rivalry. You know, unless you're going back to the Mourinho, Alex Ferguson days, but they're not local rivals. That was the only rivalry they ever had, was 20 years ago. So I don't really. I mean, if you know, Ange Postecoglou was a Liverpool fan, that doesn't put me off him. I think he says openly he was a Liverpool fan. I don't really see any real rivalry between Chelsea and Man United, other than that rivalry that they had under Jose and Ferguson.
Do you think this is the right appointment for Chelsea?
Hard to know. I think it's a wrong move for the manager. It might be easier to. I think that at this stage of his career, it might not be the right time to go to a club like Chelsea, because I think there's a lot of uncertainty behind the scenes.
It's right. I'm laughing because Ray said here, like, Thomas Frank's a Brentford fan.
There's uncertainty behind the scenes in terms of, you know, who's calling the shots, who's bringing the players in. You know, there's been interference with the board and previous managers. You know, Pochettino's falling out with them. Maresca's falling out with them. Are they bringing in a manager that they feel they can control, like Graham Potter, because of that inexperience? Maybe that's why they've gone down this route. If I was a Chelsea fan, I would feel exactly the way that they're feeling, that, well, we're Chelsea. Why are we bringing in Liam Senior? He's been at Derby, he's been at Hull, he's been at Strasbourg. This is Chelsea Football Club. So I can understand that. But in terms of the manager, I feel that it might be too much too soon. And it wouldn't be surprised if he struggled there in that role, just based on what experience has he got to lean on. And
completely agree.
Yeah, it's a very difficult one. But it's very strange for me to say this, but I've been very impressed with Rosenior, because I do like watching the Championship, and always thought Hull were very impressive under Rosenior. From what I hear, the French reports, he's been very good out in France. So and he also led the IFA Pro license coaching experience in Belfast here a couple of years ago. And I know some of the coaches that were on it, and they were very impressed with his delivery. But this is a massive step up to manage Chelsea. The one thing I would say is there's probably not as many big names at Chelsea as there has been in the past. There's no John Terry's, no Frank Lampard's, Didier Drogba's, Ashley Cole's. A lot of these players are younger, but it's still Chelsea Football Club, and the expectations are super high. If he doesn't get them into the top four, then, you know, is he under pressure next season? Possibly.
Do Chelsea go to Craven Cottage and pick up 3 points?
No, I think Fulham are in a good way at the moment. What a goal, Chris, that was. That Harrison Reed scored, possibly the goal of the season against Liverpool. As it says earlier on, Gavko had a bit of Richarlisonitis, where he took his shirt off thinking the game was over, and he got exactly what he deserved with that goal. I think Fulham are unbeaten in 5 games, 3 wins, 2 draws, and this is kind of a bit of a West London derby, as you say, and Fulham will be up for this. So, no, I am going to go for a draw. I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw.
Yeah, Fulham are in 11th at the moment. They're 28. They've got 28 points. So they're only 3 points away from Chelsea, who are sitting in 5th. And Chelsea have won 8, drawn 7, lost 5. I think I'm going to sit on the fence on this one and go 1-1. Next up, Gareth, Manchester City against Brighton. Now, as I mentioned right at the top of the show, Manchester City and Aston Villa are 6 points away from league leaders Arsenal right now. Disappointing to see City drop points because, of course, all of us Spurs fans want to see City win the league rather than our North London rivals. Do you think they can still do it?
I think this is a must-win game. If they don't win here, it could be lights out, because I do expect Arsenal to beat Liverpool on Thursday. So it's a must-win game. They haven't been clinical enough in recent games. Sunderland, they weren't good, but in the second half, they could have won the game. They really should have put Chelsea to bed in the first half. Erling Haaland, hasn't scored in the last couple of games, but I think he's been probably one of their better attacking players. I think Foden's form's dried up a bit. Cherky wasn't particularly impressive against Chelsea. And I think what's also not going to help them, Chris, is the injuries in defence, losing Ruben Dias and Gavardiol, hence why they've accelerated their interest in Mark Gahey. I find it very difficult to see Man City winning the league without Dias and Gavardiol at the back, unless Gahey comes in and one of them recovers and it's not too long term. But damaging few days for Man City. And I don't know if you've seen the game, Chris, but when Chelsea scored Pep Guardiola's fist and his hands over his fist, I think he knew it was a damaging blow. Everyone can have a game like Sunderland where you don't capitalise, and Arsenal drop points there, but at home, the way they played in the first half, that was a massive body blow not to go and win. And it puts them under big pressure for this game. If they don't win this game, I think Arsenal possibly have one hand in the league title if they beat Liverpool on Thursday.
Well, Brighton are unbeaten in their last 3 Premier League games against Manchester City, winning 2 and drawing 1, including a 2-1 win against City earlier on this season on the 31st of August. How do you see this one going? Do you know what? I'm going to go for a 2-0 City win.
I'm going to go Man City 3, Brighton 1.
Okay, right. Burnley against Manchester United. Let's start by talking about the sacking of Ruben Amorim. Of course, Darren Fletcher's coming in. You mentioned about Michael Carrick as well. This is a game I expect Manchester United to win, regardless of who is in charge, Gareth. Manchester United, with the amount of managers they've had since Sir Alex Ferguson departed the football club as a very, very successful manager. Me growing up, I used to see Manchester United win literally every game, week in, week out.
I think they announced today it's 10 managers in 12 years.
Wow.
Between interims as well. So it's crazy.
Yeah. When I say wow, we've gone through a lot of managers as well. Where do Manchester United go next in terms of a full-time appointment for the managerial role?
I think it's very interesting that there is, you mentioned that about Spurs as well, there's a lot of similarities between Man United post-Ferguson and Spurs post-Pochettino. Of course, Pochettino didn't have anywhere near the success of Ferguson, but you felt that under Pochettino, Spurs were a very stable club. Man United under Ferguson, like you pointed out, were very stable. And it almost feels like since those two managers left, it's the plasters have kind of fallen off from behind the scenes. That, under Pochettino, if it wasn't for him, some of the things that we're seeing with Spurs since Pochettino, the amount of directors of football have changed, recruitment. Daniel Levy's left the club. Of course, we've moved stadiums. There's been a lot of change on and off the pitch. Similar to what's happened to Man United, there's been so many directors of football change at Man United in that 12-year period. There's been difference in the profile of manager they've went for. They've went for David Moyes, Jose Mourinho, those type of proven Premier League managers. Then they've went an experienced one like Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Ruben Amorim. You could point to the same way Tottenham in terms of Jose Mourinho, Antonio Conte. Then you went Thomas Frank, Nuno Espirito Santo, Ange Postecoglou. So there's been, what are Man United looking for? What kind of profile of manager? What kind of profile of player? What is the expectations at Man United in the short term? What's the expectations long term? It just seems that they're in a vicious cycle that Tottenham have been in for a number of years as well. that
It's
nobody
funny.
really knows what's going on.
It's funny, Gareth. I saw a short clip of Gary Neville saying that, any manager goes into someone like Ajax, they do never change their style. They play the way that they do, and that's it. Barcelona, same thing. He said Manchester United should be exactly the same.
I think so. I think when you come to a big club, there should be an expectation that you buy into the brand of that club. I'll speak from my own personal experience. Again, youth level football, nowhere near the level we're speaking about on here. But I have went into different clubs, and within a very short space of time, I've kind of felt that my identity as a coach doesn't fit with a club ethos. And I'm actually back at the club now where I've started my coaching journey because they kind of play the same way through the academy that I like to play, which is high press, high intensity, focus on creating creative players, not really about results. We take risks, bravery, we play to the back, and if we lose goals, we fix it. And I think
It sounds like
every
Thomas
man.
Frank.
Well, we don't. But we add layers as we move on. But look, I think when you're at a club like Man United, Liverpool, Arsenal, Tottenham, Chelsea, man, all these big clubs, and you go into Europe, Arsenal, Real Madrid, but all those clubs have a certain standard of football that's expected. If you even think back to outside of Tottenham, you think back to Rafa Benitez at Liverpool, delivered the Champions League, but a lot of the fans were upset that he wasn't brave enough as a manager. And I think that they lost the league in 08-09 United, and they only lost 2 games all season, but they had so many home draws where they weren't brave enough to go and win the game. And if you think the Roy Hodgson that went to Liverpool didn't work out because he didn't buy into the Liverpool way of playing. We've had similar experiences with Spurs under different managers like Nuno. Frank might be another manager that falls into that category where the football's not really acceptable at a top club. So I am a big believer in that if you're hiring a manager that maybe plays a different way, there should be an expectation. Well, if you're coming on here to a big club, you need to buy into our brand of football, not the other way around. But I think United and Spurs have been in such bad situations, Chris, over the last few years that the managers have come on with a lot of power in terms of, well, you're in a mess, so we're going to do it my way. And it hasn't really worked. It hasn't really worked going down that way. So maybe it should go back to the way that the club sets the foundations and the manager buys into that and also adds. It doesn't have to be exactly the same, Chris. Every manager can add little tweaks and little changes, but there should be a certain style that they have to follow. And if you think about over the years at United and Spurs, and I'm by no way comparing the two clubs. We know Man United are a bigger club, but United and Spurs were two of the sort of clubs in the Premier League that always had, Chris, creative flair. Players play great football. I just don't see that with those. United have kind of got a little bit back with Cunha and Mbeumo, but for years they've been missing that. Spurs, where's our flair players now? Who are they? I don't know. So I think it's misguided what some of these clubs have done in terms of trusting these managers to do it their way, because Thomas Frank doing it his way at Brentford is so different to what doing it at Tottenham is. David Moyes doing it at Everton. They come into Man United, they try and transfer that across. Doesn't work. And it won't ever work because it's two different football clubs on two different scales. So it'll be interesting to see the next appointment, what way they go about it. Oliver Glasner is the favourite to be the next permanent manager. Of course, with Sis Fletcher's taking the next 2 games, and then there's a likelihood that Michael Carrick could come on from mid-January until May. But Michael Carrick probably has more in common in terms of his playing style than Oliver Glasner does. I mean, Oliver Glasner plays the back 3. He plays a very much a counter-attack system, exposes teams in transitions. Man United probably don't really want to be that because they've been that for a number of years under Jose Mourinho, Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, Erik ten Hag, and most recently Ruben Amorim. The only manager that was kind of played on the front foot was Louis van Gaal, and he didn't really have the players to do it. Therefore, it didn't work out. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens at Man United. But you kind of feel, Chris, that it's been going on that long now. They need to do it differently this time. But I think there's been so much change on and off the pitch. They paid a lot of money to get Ruben Amorim. Now they paid a lot of money to sack him. They paid a lot of money to get Dan Ashworth, the sporting director of Newcastle, sacked him after 2 months, brought on Jason Wilcox. And if you go back through the Ed Woodward days, there's been so much change. Who is calling the shots at Man United? I don't know. Very similar to Spurs. What is the plan moving forward? There seems to be a lack of communication from these clubs. The executives, the director. I can't remember which journalist it was today made a point about in Europe you hear a lot more from directors of football and chief executives. Think about the Bayern Munich, the boy that runs Bayern Munich. He's always speaking in the media about Bayern Munich. You only maybe hear once a year, once every 12 months from Premier League clubs about it. And I think that fans want more clarity about where their club's going, especially the ones that are struggling.
I've always said, Gareth, I think it's great because, take Thomas Frank, for example, the amount of press conferences that managers do before games, after games. And when games are coming thick and fast, it's like literally a game finishes. And then, like Thomas Frank today, game finished yesterday, press conference today ahead of Wednesday's game. So the press conferences come thick and fast. But I've always said that I think that a representative from the actual football club, whether it be a CEO or a chairman, whatever, they should do like a monthly press conference in front of the media as well, to take a lot of those questions that are then aimed at the manager, where sometimes the manager can't answer certain questions. And I've also said as well that I think that referees should be available to do an interview after the game or a press conference after the game to be more accountable with their decisions. But whether that will ever happen, I'd love to see it happen, and I think it should, because you're right in what you say about the European boards, because they do communicate a lot more to the fans, and I think that a lot of the English clubs, supporters, that they would like that as well.
We hear regularly from the Real Madrid president. We hear regularly from the Bayern Munich president, the PSG president, and I can't remember. I'm raging now. I forgot his name, but there was a journalist today that mentioned regarding Amorim sacking, how good would it be to hear from the Man United executives and the director of football of what the plan is here. And like you've mentioned it, over Christmas, Thomas Frank has done countless press conferences. That there's not much more he can say. It would be nice if Vinay or Johan Langer sat down and answered some of the questions that the reporters probably have for them, as what is the plan moving forward here? Of course they're always going to say we're back our manager, but in terms of the transfers, in terms of the direction of the club, the manager can answer that, because at the end of the day, the manager is under contract, and at any given moment, his plug could be pulled.
Gareth, very quickly, when you look at the league table, there are 4 teams that have won, Premier League games double figures. So you've got Arsenal 15, Manchester City 13, Aston Villa 13, Liverpool 10. However, between 3rd and 4th right now, there is an 8-point gap between Villa and Liverpool. So those top 3 clubs, Arsenal, City, Aston Villa, do you expect them to break away a little bit more? And at this present time, who do you think is going to sneak in the top 4 and possibly that 5th Champions League spot? If that is the case at the end of the season, who could sneak into those 2 positions?
I don't know if Villa will pull away completely. I think Villa are probably going to come back a little bit in the second half of the season, but I think they will definitely be in the top 4, top 5, whatever it is. So that leaves 2 spots. I says a couple of weeks ago, I think Newcastle might have a good Christmas period and really kick on the second half of the season. So I think Newcastle will be in there. And then I thought possibly Manchester United because of the no European factor, but we no manager now, that throws that up in the air. I think Liverpool are very...
you're changing your mind week by week, didn't you?
Yeah. I think Liverpool are very vulnerable. All up in the air with Liam Senior. Can Spurs get something going? I think if they do, they have a chance of getting in there. But I think 5th place is a towing cost. I really couldn't call it, because they're all inconsistent. It really will be who can win more games than they are. And look, I think there's a chance that you could draw the next 3 games and you might only be still the same points difference off, or maybe only 2 more points. I don't see 5 teams stretching away from the sixth spot. I think we could be going into the final day of the season with maybe 4 teams having a chance of getting into that 5th spot.
Yeah, incredible. Right, Burnley v Manchester United. What's your score prediction? I think I'm going to go for a 2-0 United win.
1-0 Man United.
Okay. Next up, Newcastle against Leeds United. Leeds. A lot of people thought Leeds were going to be relegated. They seem to have got out of
Speak
it.
for yourself, Chris. You said they were hopeless a few weeks ago before they get this run on. Unbeaten 9-6.
I didn't use that word hopeless.
He says they're in a similar situation to Burnley. They're in trouble.
Well, things can turn around. Things can turn around very quickly in the Premier League. But yeah, you're absolutely right, Gareth. They've gone on a great winless run, and full credit to them, fair play to them. Do you think they are staying up now?
Well, I think they've got 8 points on West Ham. So depending on how the game against if Nottingham Forest won, I think Leeds fans will have Nottingham Forest tops on Tuesday night, because if they won, that means they're 8 points ahead of West Ham. And realistically, can you see West Ham winning 3 games at the moment? And that's providing Leeds don't win any games. So now I think, providing Forest beat West Ham on Tuesday, Leeds have basically 1 foot in the Premier League next season. They only need to pick up maybe a few more ones, and the way they're playing, you could definitely see them getting those points. So, no, I think at the minute Leeds are going rightly. Now, I do think their run may come to an end in this game, because Newcastle away, Newcastle are very strong at home, and they're in good form now. They've turned that around. A couple of ones against Burnley away and Crystal Palace at home. I feel that Leeds, their run's not going to go on forever. So I feel that they're probably due a loss, and it may well come in this game. But I think as long as Forest beat West Ham, it's still going to be a very positive week for Leeds, because it just means they're still 8 points clear. Whereas if West Ham go on one, that gap's cut to 5 points, and it's a different looking table.
Newcastle, as we mentioned with a lot of these mid-table clubs at the moment, Newcastle are sitting in 9th. They've been inconsistent. They've won 8. They've drawn 5. They've lost 7. They've got 29 points. They're only 2 points away from the top 5, only 5 points away from the top 4. You think that Newcastle will finish somewhere around the top 4 or 5 then?
I think they'll be one of the teams in the top 5, yeah. I think they'll probably finish 4th or 5th. Just because I don't think they'll go that far in Europe. And I think as well they're better than what they've shown. And they've got players returning from injury there. Anthony Gordon being one of them. I think they're better than some of the teams that are above them. Player for player, they've got a good manager. I think Newcastle will definitely be a contender for that Champions League spot.
So I take it you're going to go for a home win?
I'm going to go for a 2-0 Newcastle 1.
Yeah, I agree. That's exactly what I was going to say. 2-0. That is a very difficult place to go, St James's Park, and their fans, when they are up for it, which is normally always, that is a very, very difficult place to go. And one of my favourite away grounds, actually, although the stairs is quite tough.
Been there. It's tough.
Gareth, lastly, the last game of Matchweek 21, Arsenal take on Liverpool at the Emirates Stadium. Of course, Arsenal are leading the way, 6 points clear. How do you see this one going?
I think on paper, you would look at it and go, difficult game for Arsenal, but how Liverpool have been playing recently, I think Arsenal will run over them. I think they'll be too strong for them physically. Liverpool are pretty poor at the back. Arsenal set pieces are going to cut. I think Liverpool are the worst team defending set pieces in Europe, the amount of goals they've conceded. Arsenal are very, very strong at those. So even if we take out the footballing side of the game in terms of, in possession, I think those set pieces will be a huge problem for Liverpool. Liverpool are unbeaten, I think, in 7 or 8 games, but I think even some of their fans can't believe that it's run on this long. So, no, I think Arsenal will have tougher games against other teams that maybe you wouldn't expect. I think Liverpool are in a false position. And I think this will be a routine victory for Arsenal, to be honest.
Previous meetings in all competitions in the club's history, played 215, Arsenal winning 73, Liverpool 81, and 61 draws. And this season at Anfield, Liverpool beat Arsenal 1-0. Against no side of Arsenal lost more Premier League games than they have against Liverpool. That's 26, level with Manchester United. These have always been good games, haven't they? Good, entertaining games.
They're good at their. I know what you're going for. I know you're going for a draw already. I know you're going for a draw. But
do you know what, Gareth?
They are always.
Sadly, I agree with you. What you said earlier. I think that Arsenal will be too strong for Liverpool. And of course, I want to sit here and I want to say that Liverpool will win this game, and I hope they do. I really do hope they do. But you're absolutely spot on. Liverpool are just not the Liverpool, nowhere near the Liverpool what we saw last season. So I feel like there's a lot for Arne Slot to sort out there. But yeah, sadly, I see Arsenal winning this one.
Yeah, look, they've always been entertaining games. It'll be interesting to see how Liverpool approach it. Will they sit back and maybe protect that defence? I think that's their only hope, and maybe trying to catch them on their counter-attack, because I think if they go toe-to-toe with Arsenal, they're going to be really exposed. My worry is that if Arsenal are on their front foot and they're getting lots of corners, I think they're going to expose Liverpool with those corners. It's possibly the best at set pieces in the world against the worst. And I can't make a case for Liverpool in this game. I think Arsenal will have more difficult games before the season's over, but I feel like Arsenal are going to win this pretty comfortably. I think it was a big shock when Arsenal beat Liverpool or beat Aston Villa 4-1. I don't think there'll be a big shock if Arsenal won this by 3 or 4 goals. I include Liverpool fans in that. I think a lot of Liverpool fans I've spoke to are fearing a bad defeat.
If you had to put all your money on a team to win the Premier Leagues this season, Gareth, is it Arsenal or is it Manchester City? Or even Villa?
This is Man City, didn't I? A couple of weeks ago. I didn't expect them to drop 4 points against Sunderland and Chelsea. But look, I think as long as it stays 6 points, even if Arsenal are perfect over the next 5 or 6 weeks, as long as Man City are matching them, they're still there, and Arsenal still have to go to Man City. So Man City could potentially win that, and it's 3 points. So it's not out of the equation yet. But I do feel it's one of those situations where if it goes to 7 or 8 points, I think it's going to be very difficult for Man City. I think the next difference in points has got to be in Man City's favour. I think it's got to go to 4 or 3 before it gets to 7, 8, 9. I think that will be very difficult for Man City to pull back, because whilst they are better this season, Man City, it's still not the same Man City of 3 or 4 years ago. So Arsenal will have to help them out. We know Arsenal have done that in the past. But look, even if it got the last 6 or 7 games and there was 5, 6 points on it, Arsenal would get nervous. So as long as that gap stays at 6 and doesn't get any bigger, Man City are still there. And Arsenal will know that. That Man City are far from finished. So I do expect both teams to win in these round of games. So it runs on our week. But Man City have got to do their job on Wednesday against Brighton, and then just hope Liverpool maybe turn up big game and take points off Arsenal.
I'm going to go for a 2-0 Arsenal win, sadly. And I tell you what, it was painful viewing of them absolutely battering Aston Villa, because the run that Aston Villa was on was amazing. And I tell you what, if you could have chosen an opponent to go to the Emirates, in the form that Aston Villa were in, you thought that they were going to really upset them. And particularly in recent years, Aston Villa have always had really good and positive results and performances against Arsenal as well. Gareth, last question for you, with Liverpool, do you think Arne Slot will be Liverpool boss regardless of league position next season?
No, I don't think he'll be sacked this season. But I think if they don't finish in the top 5, or if he finishes 5th in Champions League isn't given the 5th spot, he'll be in trouble. But it looks like it will. I think if he finishes anywhere below 5th, he'll be in big trouble. I think his only hope is to qualify for the Champions League and maybe ask for another season, more recruitment, better players defensively coming in. Maybe he would deserve another season because of the credit in the bank with the Premier League title last season. So, interesting one. I don't see them changing mid-season. I think if they would have done that with the 9 defeats and 12 they had, where they lost those games, they would have made the change then. So I think they're going to give him time to sort it out. It probably has to do a little bit more to convince the fans, because there is a lot of fans, Chris, at the minute that are not happy with him. So I think he's got to prove something more between now and the end of the season. But look, in terms of this game, I can only see one winner, and Arsenal are going to win 3-0.
3-0. Wow. Gareth, thank you so much for joining me. I'm sure these episodes are getting longer and longer.
Feels like Richard Whitehead marathons at the minute, doesn't it?
Where can people find you, Gareth, if they'd like to follow you on social media?
Thank you, Chris, for having me on again. Can you believe it? Hey, the way we're going through these fixtures over Christmas, it's match week 21. Incredible.
Wow, yeah.
You can find me on that handle there underneath at Gareth Hotspurs. I will be at the next Tottenham Hotspur League home game against West Ham. So again, the last few times I've been over, people in the pub have been saying, "Oh, nice to meet you." So again, I'll probably be about the stadium or in the Bricklayers. So you can always feel free to say hello. And Chris, thanks again for having me on. And I do think we have a bit of a break now before match week 22. So because it feels like we've been speaking so much over the last few weeks.
It does indeed. Yeah, I said this to the guys yesterday after the podcast that we've got games coming thick and fast, and Thomas Frank was saying about the players were tired. I hope that you guys aren't tired, because we've got podcasts coming thick and fast, and like you said, these game weeks seem to be coming around very, very quickly. And I talk to you guys a lot. Gareth, thank you so much. Thanks for watching, everyone. Thanks for listening. Do put all of your score predictions in the comment section below, just as a bit of fun. Let's hope that Spurs can get the 3 points at Bournemouth on Wednesday evening. Have a great week, everyone. Keep smiling, and come on, you Spurs.